All right. Hello, everyone. Hope everybody's having a good holiday season so far. Thank you for joining our office hours. I'm acting as the MC for today. Our fearless leader, Marshall, is on the ski slopes in Colorado. So I'm pitching in just to give everybody a heads up. I think everybody knows FileMaker gave a new version release. So today's topic that Jeff is preparing for us should be a nice one. So with that being said, Jeff, take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Pratt. Well, as Pratt said, FileMaker has, or more accurately, Claris has just released FileMaker 19.6.1, and this is a pretty big upgrade. We have some really nice features, one in particular that we're probably going to focus most of this time on, and that is transactions. But before we get to that, I'm going to go ahead and share the release notes so you can just have a quick look at what else is available in this new version. Obviously, we have the transactions, as I mentioned. If you are using macOS, it is now officially supported on macOS Ventura. Sign in with Apple. You can set a dictionary using a script step. We have some new get functions that I will be covering in a few minutes. And then just some back-end stuff, updated library, few things that go into the preferences, and of course the requisite bug fixes. If you really want to see all the bugs that they fixed, feel free to hop over to claris.com. There's an article about it there. But I'm guessing that's not how you want to spend your hour. So let's pop on over to.
So Jeff, can you somebody put in the comment already? Can you put that link in the Zoom chat?
Yes, absolutely. Let me stick that in there. There is the the release notes for FileMaker Pro 19.6.1. But for now, we're going to go ahead and switch over to FileMaker itself. Now, the first thing I want to cover, this is kind of a small addition, but I wanted to show it because it is a neat new feature. For a while, we have had get current timestamp. That's been there for as long as I can remember. A few versions ago, they added a new one, get current time UTC milliseconds. Now, the way this works is it tells you how many milliseconds it's been since January 1st, 1970. Obviously, that's not very helpful in that format. So what I'm going to do here is I'll duplicate it, and we will divide it by 1,000, and then get as timestamp. And now you can see the current timestamp down to the milliseconds, UTC. But in 19.6.1, they've also added get current time UTC microseconds. So just in case those milliseconds aren't good enough for you, you can now divide by 1 million, get as timestamp. And now you get the UTC down to the microsecond. Probably not a huge deal for the great majority of us, but I was actually playing around with this yesterday and found it very interesting that when I ran a let function, I could do get current UTC microseconds at the beginning of the let, and then again at the end. And even with only one line of code in the let function, I could time that it took 42 microseconds to run. So kind of cool. So now let's get to the big star of the show, and that is transactions. Now, for those that are not familiar with database transactions, I'm going to show a bunch of different ways of manipulating the same data, this data that we have here in 6 different fields. A transaction is when you tell the database, I want you to do all of these things or none of these things. So for example, in previous versions of FileMaker, there were ways that we could kind of hack transactions, but we could say text1, set this to text2 on, or text1 on, and set text2 to text2 on, text3 to text3 on. If any one of those fails, the other two would still occur. Now, this is often going to be okay, but a lot of times you want everything to happen all at once. Imagine if you're invoicing and your invoice is going against your inventory and you've got 2 people invoicing at the same time. There's only one item left in inventory. They're both invoicing. The first person gets the one out of inventory. The second one runs the create invoice script and also takes one out of inventory. Now your inventory is -1 because it didn't recognize that it needed to stop. It didn't recognize that the things that were changed before it encountered an error need to be changed back. Now with transactions, you can start your invoice step, and when it sees that the inventory is going below 0, it throws up a dialog and says, hey, you can't do this, and reverts everything that's been changed so far. So I'm going to pop open my script debugger here. This will allow us to step through the script and see exactly what's happening. Now, the first time I'm going to run this, there is no error trapping, no transaction, no nothing. We're going to set all 6 of these fields. First one, it toggles from text1 off to on. Second one, again, toggles just fine. 3 toggles. But then 4 is not modifiable. That's actually a calculation field. So I get a dialog saying, hey, you can't do that. Then I go on. 5 is also a calculation field. I get another dialog. Hey, you can't do that. 6 is also a calculation field. Still can't do that. So the way around this, we can set error capture on at the beginning. Now when we switch text1, text2, text3, when it gets to the other 3, it just returns an error in the background, and it keeps going. So I can run the whole script, just hit play here, and boom, everything changes. Even though there are errors, those 3 changed. These 3 did not. So now I'm going to use a couple of these new script steps that we have. We're going to start with open transaction and with commit transaction. So everything between these 2 steps is treated as one entity. So we'll step through. We're changing text1, text2, text3. Now we're going to try to change text4. We still get the dialog, but it jumps to the end because we had an error. So we don't see the dialog for 5 or 6. We can go one further. Go in here, and we have revert transaction. Now, revert transaction is kind of neat. It allows us to specify any criteria that we want to look for to say, hey, if this doesn't work, we need to roll this whole thing back. So I'm clicking revert transaction. Nothing happens. Well, why did nothing happen? Because my condition is get last error is not equal to 0. Open transaction worked just fine. There's no errors there. So there's no reversion. But again, we go through these 3. Since I've set error capture on, like we discussed earlier, on 4, it's going to suppress that error, but it just jumps to the end and switches all three of these back to their original values, back to on. So now we've got yet another idea. We're going to open the transaction, set these three, test 4. It gives us an error. It jumps right over that revert transaction. Why? The revert transaction is later on in the script. We found an error here. It's an error 201 as it happens. So it automatically exits that transaction and reverts all of the fields. So to see that again, this revert transaction never actually runs, because when it gets to step 4, putting a stop here, goes right over the stop, exits the transaction. Let's go on further. So now on test 1, we're going to toggle it to text 1 off. Revert transaction says if it equals text 1 on, then we can specify an error code. Now, normally FileMaker throws out whatever error code is built into the system. We saw error 201 several times because that means you cannot change a calculated field. But I can define my own error codes in here. Any number between 5,000 and 5499 is available to me. So I can put revert transaction in here with all sorts of different conditions, different error codes that tell me anything that went wrong, and return an error message based on what went wrong. But in this case, we just changed it to text 1 off. So it's just going to jump over that revert transaction because it wasn't true. 3, 2, 3, 4. Oops, there's the end. Got to revert it all. And now I've got it set to show dialog. Shows you the last error location, which tells you that the commit transaction is at line 10. This is the script name. It gives us the step where the transaction ended, and then it gives us the line number where that step is. It makes it very easy to debug. Even cooler. Go in here, we've got something very similar. Actually, let me run 4 again. I'm sorry. Show you what happens when it is equal to on. We just said it. Oh, yeah, we reverted it. So let me do that. We get to the revert field, and it immediately exits because the revert transaction was true. It gives us the same thing, but that's why I wanted to show you 5. Now, as we go through, we got our error at line 4. That last error detail tells us which line of the script gave us the error. Now, personally, I find that a lot more useful. It's not only telling me where the end of the transaction is, that's the get last error location, but get last error detail tells me exactly what went wrong. So now when I'm troubleshooting, I can go in and see, okay, it was line 7 of the script. It was a set field. So I can go in here and see what went wrong with line 7. Now, here's something that's a little tricky, and this really threw me off at the beginning, but I think this is very important to understand about the transactions. Transactions do not roll back everything. Let's see what happens here. We open our transaction, and we're going to go to layout, alternate layout, and it's exactly the same as this layout, only it says alternate layout instead of main layout. So as you watch, it's going to switch. Just alternate layout. We've gone to a different layout here. We'll set our fields, get down to where the transaction fails, Commit, give us a dialog, reverts the fields, but we're still on the alternate layout. That really threw me for a loop at first. I've got a transaction here. Why on earth is it not going back to the original layout when the transaction failed? Well, it turns out there's a lot of things that don't get undone. Here, I'll have it go to a layout that doesn't exist. It doesn't trigger it. I'm trying to open the request multiple times, doesn't trigger it. Going to a field that's not on the layout. Nope. Go to a related record, doesn't exist. Perform a function that doesn't exist on my computer. Broken value list. Broken sort records. None of that does anything. Keep going. We get to that set field and boom. A revert did work. Back to on. So let me show you what actually does something for transaction. Transactions will be validated when any of these things happen. It is not just any step that fails. It is any step that modifies the data. So under records menu, we create a new record, duplicate record. I really like this, delete record. That's really important because in the past we have been able to do audit trails and stuff, but when you delete a record, there's no way to see what the final value was. So you have to kind of trick FileMaker into recording what it was before you deleted it. Now that we can actually have a trigger with a, trigger a transaction when we delete a record, that's going to give us a lot more power in that area. Deleting portal rows, all records, imports, replace, relookup, set field, and then anything under edit, anything you're inserting. Basically what it comes down to, as I said, this is only about data. It will go back and revert the entire transaction, but only the portion related to data. So, to be perfectly honest, that went a lot faster than I was expecting it to. So, I'm going to open up the chat. If anybody has any questions about transactions or about FileMaker 19.6.1, we're here. Love to help out. Including my team as well. Anybody that has any questions about any of this. The list that's shown, question is this what will roll back or what won't roll back? This is a list of the things that will roll back. And in fact, this list is also available on Claris.com. I can grab that page as well and stick it into the chat. Under the open transaction script step, it has a list of all of these and a few caveats for some of them. So in the chat. Is there a list of errors that will force the transaction to revert? I do not believe there's a specific list of errors. It would just be any error that is returned by any of these steps. Oh, that's a good one. Can you open a transaction in one script and commit or revert in another? Okay, they actually discuss that in here. When you open and add transaction script step to a script, the commit transaction script step is automatically paired with it. So it winds up in the same script. But you can't use the open transaction script step to start a transaction within another transaction. Nested transactions using perform script will ignore nested revert transaction, commit transaction script steps within subscripts. So the bottom line is no, you cannot commit or revert in a subscript. It has to be in the same script in which the open transaction was performed. Does it still lock the record while it is open? Yes, it does. Oh, Robert also said, curious about best practices with subscripts. What are you wondering with that, Robert?
I'm sorry. So it's just because I've been using transactions with the model that was implemented in Carbon. I don't know if anyone has been familiar with that framework, but basically it lets you nest your transactions, and as this is being released, I'm called to revisit how things are being done, and I feel like I don't really think I need to commit the transaction from within a subscript, but I really think that reverting a transaction from within a subscript would be helpful. So
yeah, I can see where that would be helpful. Certainly, Claris does have a suggestions page. I think it might be claris.com/feedback. But remember, this is version 1 of the transactions in FileMaker. So it wouldn't surprise me if we see some more power added to them in the future. Serials assigned on creation also did not get rolled back. That makes sense. Did not know that, but that does make sense. Also, truncate table action cannot be reverted. So if you decide to delete your entire table in a script, that doesn't get reverted if the transaction fails. But hopefully you're not doing that very often. Anything else? Okay, well, one more thing I will mention. We just got word yesterday that FileMaker Server 19.6.2 has been released. Just some minor bug fixes since 19.6.1. We are certainly available to help you guys out with upgrading to 19.6.2 or whatever version you need for your business. So just tossing that out as well. Brad, did you have anything?
No, looks like this is going to be in record time one of our shortest office hour, so to say. No, usually Marshall is good at filling in the gap, but in his nature, if you guys have any topics that you want us to cover for office hours, don't hesitate to reach out to us and let us know what topic you want to discuss. We're always open to ideas, always looking out to help out the community of developers out there. So yeah, keep that in mind. If there's nothing else, I'll give everybody their time back and look forward to next month's office hours.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.